want you to kind of think about and jot down on your paper, on your handout there, are what skills are needed to comprehend what you have read. So just individually jot down some ideas first. What skills do kids need in order to comprehend text? Normally what I have students do and participants do is we jot things down individually, and then we share our ideas in a small group, and then we share our ideas in a large group. But since our large group is a small group, we will go right to that. And this helps students, it helps with engagement so that everybody is participating. So if ever I ask a question, I have them give them 30 seconds, a minute, jot down something, talk to a partner or talk in a small group quick, and then go to large group. My large group discussions are so much more rich, and I get more students willing to participate because they've already shared their idea once, it was accepted by somebody, and then they're willing to share out a little bit more. So what are some things that you wrote down for what the skills that they need to have? Anybody willing to share? Definitely. Definitely. Is that what you have as well, Pat?
Yeah, I just hit, and it's a little bit different because several years ago, but still with, and we had talked about this, I think you had a graphic on something posted on ELA or whatever, like what has to come first in reading, and the being able to decode and the word recognition and that fluency, and if they don't have that, there's not going to be any comprehension.
Right.
And in 6th grade, and I know you struggle with kids who don't read on the 9th and 12th grade level, but we struggle with kids that read on the 2nd and 3rd grade level, and they look at a 6-week text and they're like, it might as well be in one language.
Right. And that's why I backed way up, because we need to have those other skills down. So when we're talking about characteristics that impact comprehension, they do need phonological decoding skills and word recognition. They need the oral language abilities, including vocabulary, like you talked about. They have to have short-term and working memory abilities. So with our kiddos who have deficiencies in those areas, that's why it makes it so difficult for them. They need have background knowledge, absolutely. The ability to link new learning with previous learning, and the ability to attend to the text, stay engaged, and respond to the text. That's the hard part sometimes with the older kids, is getting them to stay focused on what they're reading and not start daydreaming or thinking about something else. Yes. And anything that I have today, if you want, if my email is on the top of the page, I will send it to you. And the chart that Pat was talking about, good reading requires decoding times language comprehension to get to reading comprehension. And there is a multiplication symbol here, because if there's a 0 in any of these areas, we are not going to reach reading comprehension. And this is the chart when I moved from being a middle school coach to a reach coach with the State Department, and we were getting early reading instruction, that the light bulbs just started going off. Because I know when I was at Tomlinson, our middle school title teachers they were doing all these vocabulary strategies and comprehension strategies, and what else can I do? These kids don't know words, they don't know this. Well, a lot of our kids were missing the decoding. And so this this quote here, no comprehension strategy is powerful enough to compensate for the inability to read the words. If we have kids who cannot decode and read the actual words, we will never get them to reading comprehension. One of the trainers that I had actually taught phonics classes to ninth graders because that's what they were missing. And so that was her job, was to go in and she did phonics with those kids. Our title teacher in Elgin, we're very fortunate. She's a former kindergarten teacher, and she does the reading surveys and things like dibbles with our 6th through 8th graders to find out the part that they're missing, and that's what she works on. And so we've got 8th graders in Elgin working on decoding because that's what they missed, and we're never going to get them to where they need to be if they don't understand that. So if you've got kids, and it's super hard when you're in class to try to figure out exactly what they need and how can I teach this kid sounds when this kid needs, knows all the sounds and is reading 3 levels above where they need to be reading. But if they ever get some small group instruction and you can figure out exactly what they're missing, that will help them. Because if they don't have that, we cannot get to that reading comprehension.
That's my biggest issue with data guides and data analysis. It's like, okay, but this is not telling me what to do with a kid that can't read.
Mm-hmm.
And don't tell me to do main idea on the 3rd grade level. Okay, that may make sure that they understand what main idea is. It's not going to help them read a test on the 6th grade level. Right.
This is 7 through 12 ELA. I heard somebody say that the schedule changed, so if you printed it previously, it was different, and they might not be here anymore. So you might want to check the updated schedule to be sure. And it is hard, and it depends on where your school is at. Last year I have a co-taught class, and I had students reading in the 6th grade at kindergarten and 1st grade levels, and I talked to the principal and I said, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to move them, or do you want me to teach them 6th grade strategies for a test that they're not going to be able to read and pass? And she said, I want you to move them. And so we went back and we did lots of phonics things and fluency things, and we moved them from kindergarten to the end of 1st grade. Well, for a year, for them missing that was huge for them, and that's what they needed. So it just depends on your administration and what they're wanting you to do. When we talk about comprehension strategies, they are used before, during, and after the reading. To preview, to set the purpose. During, we're going to stop and check. And after, we are going to recall and evaluate. So we need to make sure we are hitting all of those areas as we are asking students to comprehend what they are reading. So we're going to talk today, I wanted to talk a little bit about summarizing and paraphrasing. So on your paper there's a spot for you to write down your definition of summarizing. It's what we're asking our kids to do. We've got some standards on it that we're going to look at. What is your definition of summarizing? Jot that down for me. The actual definition, one definition of summarizing, is a brief statement or account of the main points of something. We might do a summary of chapter 3. So summaries include longer text that we're looking at. It can just be just like a one-page thing that we do a summary on, but it's different from paraphrasing. Go ahead then and write down your definition of paraphrasing. difference with paraphrasing is summarizing was a noun. We've got verbs and nouns for paraphrasing definition. But it's express the meaning of the writer or speaker, something written or spoken, using different words, especially to achieve greater clarity. As a noun, a rewording of something written or spoken by someone else. So we would not paraphrase chapter 3. We would summarize chapter 3, and we might paraphrase a paragraph or a few sentences out of chapter 3, but not the whole chapter, because then that moves into a summarization of it. Paraphrasing, it is a restatement. It's written with different words. Those words are often reorganized. We need to be faithful to the author's intended meaning, and it's reader-friendly. So if you're reading something more technical and someone says, give that to me in English, that's when we're paraphrasing something. Or what's that mean? What's the layman's term for that? That is where we're going to be looking at paraphrasing. When we look at the standards for paraphrasing, the important thing with our standards is I want you to always look back at the grade before you and look forward to the grade ahead of you to find out where exactly you kind of fit in with your standards. So in 5th grade is when students begin to paraphrase main ideas with supporting details in a text. In 6th grade, it says they will paraphrase. So our 5th grade teachers are working on beginning. Our 6th grade teachers are going to get them paraphrasing. 7th grade, it's kind of the same. 8th grade, it says they will summarize and paraphrase ideas while maintaining meaning and a logical sequence of events within and between texts. And 9th through 12th, the standards stays the same. And the thing about the standards is some people have looked at the standards and said, well, it's all the same thing, or it's not detailed enough. What you have to remember is that what changes is the complexity of text that we're looking at. So your 9th graders are reading different text than your 12th graders, but they're having to do the same skills. You know, you're having them paraphrase something at a 9th grade level versus paraphrasing something at a 12th grade level. Same skill, but you're going to get different results with them. So that's what we really need to remember is that the level of text is increasing. So they're not just doing the same thing again. I'm doing the same thing with harder text, and that's where the change is and that's where the difference is. There's also going to be a difference when we talk about our ELA being recursive. We're always coming back to it because I may spend time teaching them how to paraphrase informational text, which is usually where we paraphrase. But then if I say, okay, they read something nonfiction, and I'm like, well, what's that mean? And they give it to me in different words, what happened, it's also kind of a paraphrase with fiction. And so we really need to, as we're looking at our standards, or even giving a summary, I'm going to summarize differently if I'm summarizing a story versus summarizing nonfiction text versus summarizing what a poem means. And so the text that we're using and the level of text that we're using is what changes, even though we're talking about the same skills. So always remember that with the standards, and always look back to determine if what they should know or not. So as a 7th grade teacher, I'm going to say, okay, they should be able to do this because they had support. They should have done it last year. They should know what it means if I say, hey, we're going to paraphrase this, or I want you to paraphrase that, but we're using a harder text is where my understanding has to be. Okay, so even from 8th to 9th grade, it's the same. This is just a little bit wider. They will summarize and paraphrase ideas. We've added in generalize. So in 9th grade, if you're asking them to generalize something, you need to look back. Okay, they've not done that before. So that's something new that I'm introducing at the 9th grade level. Whereas with your 12th graders, well, they should have been doing that all along. We're just using more complex text with them. So kind of always look at that as you're looking at the standards. With paraphrasing, I always tell my students, if you can talk about it, you can write about it. So before we start writing, I give my students a chance to talk about something. Whether that be they're summarizing something, they're going to paraphrase something, think about it, give them time to think, then tell a partner, then go to your writing. When we think about the order in which we learn things, babies learn to talk first. That's our natural thing. Everybody can do that. Our brains are wired to talk. They're not wired to read. So we need to give them that time to talk about it first, get their ideas out. It's much easier to write then. When we paraphrase, this is an activity I found, something to kind of help them remember. Paraphrase, put the text in your own words, avoid copying the text, rearrange similar text, ask yourself if you've included all of the important points to this. When we paraphrase, I go through this lesson with them that we talked earlier about. You have to use different words and you have to rearrange your words. And so I show them this. At the start of the Great Depression, many Americans wanted to believe that the hard times would be only temporary. Well, how can we paraphrase that? How can we say that in a different way so that I'm not copying it when you've read it in this research book and now you need to take notes on it to put it into a paper? So we look at an example. Is this plagiarism or not? At the beginning of the Great Depression, a lot of Americans wanted to think that the hard times would be only temporary. The kids are going to tell you, well, I use some different words. And so what I show the students is, okay, well, here you changed start to beginning, and you changed many to a lot. That's still plagiarism. It's going to check you. It's going to count that as plagiarism. That is not paraphrasing. So showing them this ahead of time really helps them when you tell them to take notes. What I found is we tell students to take notes. They don't know how to take notes. They don't know what you mean by that. So you need to stop and show them exactly what you mean. I've spent many, many months pulling my hair out when I start research projects because I didn't teach all the steps before research. You need to teach them to paraphrase. You need to teach them how to take notes. You need to teach them how to outline. You need to teach them how to put their ideas into a paper. All of those things have to come before we can just say we're going to start a research project. And so show them something like this. Devices in the iPod range are primarily digital audio players designed around a central click wheel, although the iPod Shuffle has buttons too. So if we have this passage, an iPod is an MP3 player that lets you choose and play songs to listen to using a click wheel or on older versions, buttons. Would this be acceptable as being paraphrased? Would you be okay with that? Yes. This one is much different. And you can tell the students, some of the words you can't change. An MP3 player is an MP3 player. So if you have to say MP3 player, you can say MP3 player. But show them, okay, look at how different this is. This would be acceptable. Then we have this one. A letter of thanks is a courteous acknowledgement of a gift or of something that was done for you. And it was changed. Someone paraphrased it. A thank you note is a polite acknowledgement of a present or something nice someone did for you. There's no rearranging. And so talk to the kids about, you use some different words, and depending on their level. If this was our first attempt and we're in 5th grade trying this, I might be like, yes, you've got some different vocabulary. Now we need to work on the arrangement. If it's my seniors, I'm going to be like, really? You think that's going to fly? No, that's not going to fly. Yes, and they do. So sometimes just pointing something out like this and saying, okay, look at this. Even when I read this sentence, it sounded the same. It had the same flow with it. So if you can just show them something like this, sometimes the light bulb will click on for them. Oh, it completely needs to be rearranged as well. It cannot just be a few different words there. So take some time to go through. Sometimes it feels like we're hand-holding them with some of these things, but that's really what we need to do sometimes just to give them a starting point. This would be a much longer lesson in 5th grade than it would be with my seniors. You know, it would be with my older kids, it might be, here, hey, we're going to do this mini lesson. Remember this, you know this. With my younger kids, we're going to take a lot more time when we go through this. When we're paraphrasing, some reminders. Remind them that they have to reword. They're going to replace words and phrases with synonyms. They're going to rearrange the words within sentences to make new sentences. They're going to realize that some of the words and phrases cannot be changed. You can't change a name, you can't change a date, but you can present them differently. And recheck to make sure your paraphrase conveys the same meaning as the original text, because we don't want to We need to be true to the author, what the author intended. We can't change what the author intended. And one thing that I do with my students to have them practice this was something I bought on Teachers Pay Teachers, and it's cards, they're task cards, and so they're supposed to do them individually, where they read the little paragraph and then paraphrase it. But to start it, because I like them to talk about it first, is I printed off 2 sets, and so each group would get, a pair would get the same number. So here's passage 32. And then I had them stand up with a partner and read it. Both people read it. One person would paraphrase to the other person without looking at their card. And then the other person would just check them to make sure, to tell them, hey, no, you just plagiarized that. Or, that was too close to the original. So give them some time doing it orally first so that they can then do it on their own in writing. It gets them up, it gets them moving, and it helps them practice it a little bit. And I always, when I do it, I'll do a practice one with them so they can hear. Because even as adults, if you have to stop and think and reword and use synonyms and change the order, it's a hard concept. It's hard to do. It's hard to do sometimes even with, this was like a 4th through 8th grade level. I would still do it because when I've had adults do it, there's only a couple of us here, so we won't do that. But when I've had adults do it, they've had to stop and think, okay, well, how else would I say that?
Copy and paste.
Right. And so, and you tell them, that's why I tell them they can't look at the card. You've got to remember it, because if I'm reading this, I have to comprehend it. I have to know what I'm reading to know how to say it in a different way. So if we're both reading this card, I'm going to read it, and read it, and read it. And okay, now tell you what I just read. I have to comprehend what I read to find new words to change the order. And so that's just a practice for them. And so then I tell them before they start doing their research, it's just like when we did the cards. You should read it, cover it up, write it down, and then check yourself to make sure that you were true to the author's intention and that you didn't plagiarize anything. And then we talk about, think back to the activity we did. Is it like, were you like the iPod or were you like the thank you notes? Did you completely, or did you only change words, or did you change the order and your vocabulary where you could? So going through, and even if we think, well, they should know how to do this. Yeah, maybe they should, but sometimes they need a little reminder, a quick activity to get them thinking about how differently to paraphrase something. When we are taking notes, I use Cornell notes. Have you ever used Cornell notes before? So when we're having them do those Cornell notes, they can put their main idea on the left side, or their vocabulary, or their questions, and this is where they should be paraphrasing. And if we can teach them this in ELA, how to do this, or teach your science or your social studies teachers how to do Cornell notes and get the kids practicing paraphrasing, that's one of the standards that should not just be ELA. Our geography teacher has the kids use Cornell notes, and she has them practice paraphrasing all the time. That is a skill that they need to see transfers. It's not just when I'm going to do a research paper. It's when I'm studying for science. It's when I'm studying for my social studies, my history that I have to do. And so then we tell the kids, we move from, I'm doing it orally with you. Okay, now do it on your own, write it down without looking back in your book or at the card, and then you can check yourself. I can put the two side by side, and did I have it exactly or not? Did I leave anything out? Because I can add things in. So teaching the kids to go back is also difficult to do. And teaching them, if I have it right here, it's just like copy and paste. It's just like I went to that article online and copied it and pasted it into my notes. You can't do that. That's plagiarism. You need to be able to put it into your own words. If you can put it into your own words, then I know that you understand what you read. Which goes back to the comprehension that we were talking about.
If you're doing this for a piece of text in the classroom, or like the social studies teacher is doing it, or science, or whatever, are they doing it for the whole text, the whole lesson, or do they read and discuss the lesson stuff? It's like, okay, look at the paragraph or the section on page 32. I want you to use your Cornell notes to paraphrase and summarize just that one subject?
That is up to that teacher and how they've taught it. If it's, I tell my science and socialist teachers, if you're going to try this, try it with the shorter section first, because usually if you've got four lessons, choose the one that's shorter, and so maybe once a week you'll do Cornell notes and paraphrasing. Or maybe as the teacher, that's what you're talking about. As you're having your discussion, you turn your heading into the question or the main idea, and you read it together, and you talk about it, and, well, how could we paraphrase this? How could we say this? What's important to say? And then we're going to write it down as a class, and they take class notes, is where I would start.
Because that's what I do for the first 2 or 3 times with anything on the new standard, like the harder ones.
Right.
We did it together.
Right. And I would do it together because I want that as an anchor lesson, as a model. I would do it together with 12th graders first so they know exactly what I want. And then when I turn it over to them, then they can keep those notes as, oh, did I do it like we did it in class? And they have that model for that. Do a quick mini, but if we're going to do a research paper, do a quick mini pull it on somebody or pull it on a topic, and how would I paraphrase this? This is what this needs to look like. They always want to see an example. Even as adults, we're like, well, if you show it to me, then I can do it. What is it that you want? And that's what we need for the kids too. We need to show them exactly what we mean by this, so that then they can take it and put it into and make it their own. So it's something you have to practice a lot, and then with different texts, and then they'll forget, and you'll be like, no, you're copying now. And with that, when I show them this, it doesn't have it for some reason in this PowerPoint. I think it's because I switched from Google Drive over, but I changed this, so when this one popped up, I had the words in red that were exactly the same, or the words that had been changed. So like this one, they could see exactly the words where I had changed, and I would say, oh, how many, you don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you would have done this? And they'll either raise their hand, and they'll be like, yeah, you changed words, and have those discussions exactly what it can look like, because they'll try to take the easy way out. They'll try to just copy and paste, but we can't allow them to do that, because then they get into trouble later on. So, like I said, I would take these cards, take something simple first. Don't give them full text to be paraphrasing. Just, a few lines as a paragraph. Put that into your own words. And it's a hard task to do. And I always model it for them first before I turn it over to them. And am always double checking with them as well for what they need to do. So do you have any questions? Okay. Any other standards you just want to talk about as you're looking at them, or how have they gone for you? How long have you been teaching? Okay. How's it going? Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the only thing I've had to do with feel this, so I'm fine.
Okay. Yeah. Switching over, Pat, you doing okay? Yeah.
Next year I'll be better.
Yeah. As with anything, once you've done it before.
That's what I'm saying in my summer.
Yeah.
Is creating units for each standard, and then depending on what decides to do with the pacing calendar, then it's like, okay, I already have this stuff, and then it's still up there if I'm going to be teaching. I know in reading you're supposed to do writing, and in writing you do reading, or English, but here there's still 2 different classes.
Right.
So I still don't know for sure which one I'm going to be doing. I know there were some. I don't know if I can go to them and read off about it. That there were times that we had discussions like, really, you think that's what it's wanting us to, And I understand the, I don't want to say vagueness, because they're not vague, but the non-specific of it. But sometimes we wondered if we were going deep enough, or if what we were thinking was too surface level, and are we teaching it deep enough, not just for the test, but just
for them to know. And
know.
that's where I would always go back and look at what does the next grade have to do, and so here, when I just look at this between, 5th to 6th, well, they're going to begin to paraphrase. Well, how deep do I need to go with that? Well, when I see in 6th grade, again, the thing to remember about the standards, they're end-of-the-year standards. So by the end of the year, I need my students to be able to paraphrase main ideas with supporting details in a text. So even though it's been introduced here and they're working on it, I'm still introducing and working on it because by the end of the year, this is what they need to know. And then I look ahead, they need to be able to do that by the end of 7th grade as well. But since I've had it as well, they can go a little bit deeper. They can go with some more complex text, maybe longer passages, and I also know they have another year to practice that before we get into putting the paraphrasing into our summaries and different things like that.
Okay. So, right. So that's the paraphrase one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Summaries includes summary once you get into 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
But our standard 6.1, students will create an objective summary.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? I mean, that's one that we had. It's like,
what did you get caught up on the word objective?
I guess so. But I was looking at they have to write a summary in which they are being objective.
Mm-hmm.
That they have a piece of nonfiction text,
mm-hmm.
a paragraph or a section of it. You have them, and it says, including the main ideas and supporting details while maintaining the meaning and logical sequence of events.
Mm-hmm. So I
Some
think
of them we got bogged down on.
Right.
I don't know if we were like the kids trying to read too much into them.
I think that happens, and I know this summer the ELA task force is going to work on breaking it down just a little bit, maybe on what some of those things maybe mean to help people out. But to me, if I pull that up and I look at, is that section 2 or section 3?
It's 6.2 or 1.
Just so I can see exactly what. What?
Or 1. Got a little trigger happy, didn't you?
Yeah. So in 5th grade, they've also created that objective summary. Then if we go to 4th grade, they're still summarizing events or plots of the story of a text. And so I think that's where, we're still talking about, well, we've got fiction and nonfiction in there. The summary just bumps up a level, I think is what we're doing with them. Here.
So in 7th grade, they're doing an objective summary too.
Yes, in 7th grade, 5th grade does an objective summary, 6th grade does the objective summary, 7th grade does it, and then 8th grade changes over to summarize and paraphrase ideas. So,
Okay.
Yeah. It keeps them separate in that middle school area, and then in 8th grade, it kind of puts them all together.
And they're the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the wording is exactly the same. So, again, this is just with more sophisticated, challenging text.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and that's the part that you always need to remember is that the complexity of the text is changing. And I can't say that enough just because that's what teachers, they're like, well, it's the same thing that they did last year. Well, no, it's not because you're using different text, and the text should be harder than what you did last year with them. And they need to think about it on kind of a different level. And if you think about inferencing, we need experiences to help us make inferences, and they've had more experiences. So even if they read the same text as last year, they're going to maybe be able to add some more things into it, because deeper understanding, because they've just lived longer and had more experiences. So, yes, but always go back and see what the ones before you had. So. Other than that, it didn't take quite as long this time because we didn't have as many people to kind of do some of the activities to practice. But if you have any questions about the standards or if you need anything in this presentation, if you just email me, I will send it to you. So if you want to take off now. You can, or we can stay. We can keep talking if you want an early lunch. So if you're coming back for the afternoon session.
I got another one I had for just
Yes.
not just one specifically, is it's not like we didn't do writing, and it's not that we taught grammar, but they have specific grammar and writing things in the rating standards. We're like,
Right.
What? Subject verb agreement? That just came out of the blue?
Well, because before, in past, all parts of speech were listed almost at every grade level. And so nouns were listed for 12th graders and they were listed for kindergartners. And it was just, you never knew. We wanted to make it specific for a grade level focus almost. Like, at some point we need to look at that, because as a teacher, sometimes you're like, ooh, I didn't quite get to this, but they have it next year, so it'll be okay. And when nouns were in every grade level, you still get kids and they're like, I don't know what a noun is. No,
I agree.
You do. You probably have kids who are like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. But to make that grammar more of a focus and tying that reading in, they need to see it in real world applications, because when we just give it to them on a worksheet, they don't remember it. And I know you've heard me tell that before. When I taught at Tomlinson my first year, I taught 7th grade. I used that grammar book with Fidelity, and I did everything in it, and we did every worksheet and every activity, and then they moved me to 8th grade, and I was starting to go again because I had taught elementary previous to that. I wasn't sure exactly what to do. 8th grade, I had some of the same kids, same book, same rules, different sentences, and they couldn't do it. And I'm like, you can't blame your teacher last year because I was your teacher, and it just didn't stick for them. But then if you can show it to them in their text and help them identify it in their text, that people use this and do this. Like, we were working with subject verb agreement, and I've got some kids who farm kids, and their families are farm kids, and I said, it's not he don't like. Yes, it is. No, it's not. He doesn't like talking about subject verb agreement. And I said, your grandpa may say it wrong, but please don't go correct your grandpa because you might get in trouble. But just you need to know that this is how it's supposed to be. And like when we look in our text, does anybody say he don't? Well, no. Okay, well, that's where you're not going to find that unless it's a dialect and it's in quotation marks in the book. And then we talk about that too. You look at that and you all laughed when he said he don't like this. Well, why did we laugh? Because that's not correct. And so, and it's in the book because it's in quotation marks. That's just how he said it, and that's what quotation marks mean. And so using that in things that they're going to see every day, because we don't see a subject verb agreement worksheet every day.
The kids thought I was like a witch with powers or something. After we had taken the Alpha Plus test, we went over it. And again, the selections are lame. I mean, there's just no other word for it. They're lame. And anyway, I was talking about a kid that there were 3 that had to do with cows. One was fiction, the other 2